And greetings, back with Hour 2. Steve Deace here, filling in for Brian Fisher. I am the host of the nationally syndicated Steve Deace Show that airs around the country, including some top markets like New York City, Houston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern, Monday through Friday. And also, we'll resume our coverage here on AFR each night as well. So make sure you're tuned in for that when we make our return here to the American Family Radio Network next week. We are filling in for Brian Fisher. We want to thank Bobby Jindal for joining us last hour talking about religious liberty, religious freedom. I also explained why the Duggars might be the key to saving Western civilization. We've got to have a lot more babies. We have our birth rate at a historic low, and we have not enough taxpayers and too many tax takers. So we are in a demographic freefall, so we need more kids. So if you missed all of that, make sure you go back and get the podcast of this show via AFR a little bit later on. And you'll probably want to go back and get the podcast of what's coming up next. U.S. Senator from the great state of Texas, Ted Cruz, joins us here on AFR. And Senator Steve Deace, thanks for joining us here this afternoon. We know you're busy. We appreciate you carving out some time for us nonetheless.
Steve, it is great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
So, Senator, I want to start with what's going on now with Obamacare. And I told our audience last week that this regime has become so lawless, they now will not even enforce their own laws. So last week they decided that this thing's going to become such a disaster that they instituted Save Whatever's Left of 2014.com by suspending this past the midterm election, at least the employer mandate. But I don't understand how they think it's viable to penalize individuals and not corporations. I don't know how they think that's going to play with the American public. And I don't see why we just don't defund the whole thing right from the outset, even if it means we shut the government down to do it. What say you, Senator?
Steve, I think you are absolutely right. Obamacare, the wheels are falling off of Obamacare. The lead Senate author of Obamacare, Democratic Senator Max Baucus, described where Obamacare is heading as a, quote, major train wreck. And as this law is starting to be being implemented, the American people are saying over and over again, it isn't working. It is killing jobs. It's causing more and more small businesses to lay people off, to forcibly restrict the hours that people are working to 29 hours a week or less to get under the Obamacare 30-hour threshold. It is driving up health insurance premiums dramatically. It is hurting our health care system. It's hurting our economy. It's hurting jobs, and it's not working. That's why on July 3rd, the Obama administration basically admitted it wasn't working and just put out a little blog post from a staffer at the Treasury Department saying, oh, by the way, the employer mandate that goes to large businesses, we're going to suspend it for a year. And that is an admission, exactly as you said, that this is not working. It is a failure. And the point you made a moment ago is exactly right. The answer that Republicans in the Senate should be standing for, that all of us should be standing for, is this bill needs to be repealed and it needs to be defunded, every penny of it. So this week I introduced a bill to defund all of Obamacare, not just the part that they're suspending for a year for big companies, but every bit of it that is impacting hardworking taxpayers. We need to stand together right now, and the American people need to stand together and demand not a penny more should go to Obamacare.
Senator, explain how the folks who made a lot of hay off of the 47% comment in last year's election suddenly think it is viable to say to the American public, we are going to provide Obamacare relief to corporations, but not to individuals. I mean, to me, that's almost like surrendering the U.S. Senate. I don't understand how that is either fair, moral, or even a politically viable position to take.
Steve, you're exactly right. The Obama administration has always been catering to the whims of giant corporations and big businesses at the expense of working people, at the expense of average Americans. You look at something like the Dodd-Frank bill. Dodd-Frank bill, you remember, came out of the financial crisis. It was ostensibly going to stop the problem of giant banks that were too big to fail. What happened with Dodd-Frank? The big banks got even bigger, and Washington put massive regulations and burdens on small banks, community institutions that are going out of business while the giant corporations get bigger. This is an administration whose central focus is on power. It is on power over our healthcare system, financial system, our energy system, power over the American people, and it does so through strengthening giant corporations at the expense of the little guy. And you are exactly right when you talk about 47%. You know, the people who have been hurt the most under the Obama economy have been the most vulnerable among us. They have been young people, Hispanics, African Americans, single moms, all of whom have seen unemployment going up and up and up as these policies hammer small businesses and destroy jobs.
U.S. Senator Ted Cruz is our guest. Last week when the regime made this call, we had one of your fellow wacko birds actually on the air with us as this announcement was coming out, Mike Lee, senator from Utah. And he questioned whether the regime even has the constitutional authority to just unilaterally decide not to even enforce this or not. You've served with some constitutional attorneys as a clerk to the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice in the past. What's your read on that, Ted?
Well, Mike Lee, as you know, is a dear friend. I think he is one of the strongest conservatives in the Senate, and he and I have been fighting side by side over and over and over again. And as usual, Mike is exactly right. And unfortunately, it's part of a pattern. It is part of a pattern in this Obama administration of disregarding the law. Over and over again, if they see a law that they think is inconvenient, that they don't wish to follow, they simply ignore it and refuse to implement it. The Obama administration did that with the immigration laws, where a year before the last presidential election, President Obama said, no, of course I don't have the constitutional authority to refuse to enforce our immigration laws. And then 6 months before the election, suddenly, magically, the authority materialized and he just stated, we will no longer enforce the laws that Congress has passed. On this, Obamacare, on its face, goes into effect. These mandates on large businesses go into effect on 2014, but they realized politically a lot of Democrats are scared. They're scared because this thing isn't working. The wheels are falling off, and the American people are understanding that it's the Democrats who created this baby, and so their attitude, and it's the Chicago-style approach to politics where just the ends justify the means and disregard the law. And it's why, I mean, look at the method and how they put this out. On July 3rd, the day before the 4th of July holiday weekend, they put out a little blog posting by a staffer at the Treasury Department. You don't get to change the law of the United States, change the signature burden that is wreaking havoc on our economy, wreaking havoc on our healthcare system, and then hide it in the dead of night. It is part and parcel of a cynical political attitude. What we need to be doing instead, Steve, is we need to see Republicans and Democrats in Washington coming together to fix the fiscal and economic problems in this country, the grave fiscal and economic problems. We need to come together to restore economic growth, to get people working again, and nothing would have a greater impact in doing that than defunding and repealing every single word of Obamacare.
Senator, if this legislation is the threat to economic viability, liberty, and freedom many of us believe, then it would seem the leadership in your party, especially in the other chamber where they have the majority, if there was ever a time to draw a line in the sand and say there's such a threat to future American exceptionalism and economic sustainability, we just can't go forward with the rest of government as long as this remains in place, it would seem like this would be it. I mean, and it's not just even economics. It's what it does to religious liberty with companies like Hobby Lobby. It's the biggest child-killing piece of legislation in American history, frankly. So when you look at all the various aspects of our lives that it threatens to change, if we're not willing to die on a hill for something like this, then I don't know what hill we'd be willing to die on.
Steve, I think the gravity of the threat is exactly as you described it. This is destroying jobs. It infringing on religious liberty. You look at the Obamacare mandate for religious charities and hospitals or Hobby Lobby trying to force believers to violate their faith and provide abortifacients, provide for those whose faith don't allow it contraceptives. That's contrary with centuries of our constitutional protections, protecting the right of each and every one of us to worship Almighty God and not have the federal government getting in and trying to dictate our faith. And the time to stop it is now. And you put your finger at the outset of this segment on the critical issue, which is that we're going to have this fall a continuing resolution, which is the mechanism that will keep funding the American government. That will be the leverage point at which we will be able to stand and fight on Obamacare. Now, what it will take is Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House standing up and saying, under no circumstances will I vote for any continuing resolution that funds one penny to Obamacare. If we do that, Obamacare will be defunded, and all it will take is Republicans actually standing up. Now, Steve, let me tell you, that's not going to happen internally. It's not going to happen based on simply the convictions bursting out of their heart. The only way it's going to happen is if men and women all across this country pick up the phone, pick up their computer and email and speak out and tell their elected officials, stand up and do not vote for any continuing resolution that funds a penny of Obamacare. That's how we get it done, as if the American people demand it of our elected officials.
U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, always good to talk to you. And I know there are scores of Americans around the country that are excited by what you and your fellow wacko birds are attempting to do to shake up the status quo there in the U.S. Senate. So on behalf of all of them, please continue. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the encouragement, Steve. Thank you for the prayers, and thank you for your speaking out for liberty. I'll tell you, as dire as things are, I'm optimistic that we're in the process of turning things around, and we're going to do that. We're going to take our country back. We're going to get back to the Constitution. We're going to restore liberty. We're going to get back to the principles our mighty nation was founded on, and it's going to take the American people standing up together to make that happen. And thank you for your leadership helping make that happen.
You're welcome, brother. God bless. We'll have you back. Take care. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas, and he's right. I mean, these folks, if they had the courage of conviction within them, we wouldn't be at this point in the first place. So it is going to take we, the people, that whole government by the consent of the governed thing, it is going to take we, the people, standing up and kind of pointing a metaphorical gun at their heads to encourage them to do the right thing. More in a moment.